let's go ahead and get started. David, you write the Pepper Perspectives Substack, which is at davidpepper.substack.com. Everybody should subscribe to it. And this morning, you had a great piece breaking down Harvard's response and now lawsuit that they filed in U.S. District Court against the Trump administration. So can you give us a little bit of the backstory of how we have ended up with Harvard suing the Trump administration?
Sure. I mean, the complaint tells it well. And someone who's a lawyer by training, sometimes and I knew they'd have good lawyers in this, a really well-written complaint can break down things into very simple terms. And the punchline is, once you read this complaint and once they make their arguments, no institution in America, private education institution, should ever cave to Donald Trump, because his behavior is so outrageously illegal that caving to it, you are actually undermining the law yourself. It's so over the top. And I think this Harvard complaint does makes that clear. So they walk through the whole process of Trump approaching them like other schools, initially saying this is about anti-Semitism, but then they make very clear that that's not what this is about, because Harvard has been trying to deal with anti-Semitism on campus in responsible ways. They've got task forces and other things. There was literally a visit set up by the anti-Semitism task force that was planned for late April. So they didn't even do the visit. They just started sending these threatening letters, and then a 10-point demand that had nothing to do with anti-Semitism and everything to do with basically undermining almost every aspect of running the university. And when Harvard, using its freedom of speech, said, no, we're not going to let you take over the running of our school, the Trump administration immediately froze the funds. And then, really in a chilling way, and I go through this, they didn't just freeze the research funds. They attacked Harvard in multiple ways that is literally like what you'd expect a Putin or Orban to do.
Yep.
Again and again, every way possible. They are punishing them for literally saying, we will not give away basically the keys to running Harvard to the federal government run by Trump. And without going through all the details, the two big arguments they make, which are very powerful. One is, and this is getting lost in the whole debate, this is why no school should be caving here. One of the most essential elements to the First Amendment of the United States Constitution is academic freedom. There's a long line of cases saying that. You don't just get to say, because you're the government, Putin wants to do this, Orban does, but in the United States of America, the First Amendment says you can't just walk into a school and start telling it how to run its school. That's the First Amendment. And this is the part that some of the right-wing groups don't figure out. And even if you give money for certain purposes that they've applied for and received, like grants, you can't hold that money out there as blackmail to force them to do all sorts of other things on other issues. That's a violation of the First Amendment, straight up.
Right. Yeah.
They walk through that very well. They have great language. And the second one I'd say is, and we can talk, and then I'll open up whatever questions folks have. There is a way to cancel contracts. Research contracts. There is a path. It is defined very precisely by statute. As you'd expect, there's some due process to it. You get notified. They have to show what you're doing wrong, including if it's discrimination, to actually legitimately cut off a contract that you've earned and relied on. They didn't do one of those steps. They wrote random letters with different accusations, never showed any violation of any sort, and then canceled it. So this violates the Constitution, and it also violates very clear law that we'd expect to have, like in any contract, that you have to follow a certain procedure. You can't just politically start canceling contracts. And when you go through both these, this is when you really look at, and not know if, I don't mean to cast stones in other places, but you look at Columbia and you think, what were you thinking to allow illegal acts to force you to do things? It's just, same with law firms too. What are you thinking? These things are so illegal that you need to do what Harvard did and say, hell no, we're not going to go along with what is essentially an illegal assault on our university. So I won't go through any more details, but it really is very well argued. and we could talk about it's interesting who's making these arguments too.
Yeah, I definitely wanna talk about Colombia in a minute because I cannot believe that short term, it's a horrific thing to do. Long term, I think it has terrible repercussions coming for
Yeah,
Colombia to have done what they've done. They have the Columbia School of Journalism. Like, this is they should know the First Amendment, and they
yeah,
should be willing to stand up and defend it. I pulled a paragraph from your Substack today, which is an excerpt from, the argument that is made in this complaint, and I just wanna read a part of it because it lays out so clearly just how egregious and insane the stuff is that the Trump administration is trying to force down private schools and universities throats. So the government dictated that Harvard reform and restructure its governance to reduce the power of certain students, faculty, and administrators. It required that Harvard hire a third party to conduct an audit of the viewpoints of Harvard's student body, faculty, and staff. Then, based on the results of the university wide viewpoint audit, Harvard would be required to hire a critical mass of new faculty and admit a critical mass of new students to achieve viewpoint diversity in each department. I just, there is, I can't imagine anything that is more blatant an attempt at complete control of what a university can teach than by determining what is going to make up the student body, what's going to make up the faculty, and blackmail them
yeah,
with federal funds when they don't fall in line. It's
yeah.
just shocking, and I hope the judge, sees it the same way, and I assume this is gonna go up the food chain, and be appealed no matter what the decision is. But what do you so let's get back to Columbia and also this letter that 150 colleges and universities around the country have signed on to in defiance of what the Trump administration is doing, which is really exciting to see. Wh- how does Columbia do they can they asked to, like, rethink their decision to cave to the Trump administration? And, like, how do they get back on the right side of this thing now?
You know, I hate to say it. I mean, the lesson from all these, and we see it already with the law firms that caved, is they'll have another chance to say no because once you cave once, you're asked to do it again and again and again. The lesson is you never will stop being demanded. Once you show that you don't have the backbone to stand up, they've got you. So the question is, how early of being bullied do you say no? My guess is Columbia will still have that chance, and let's hope they take it. Law firms will be asked to do more pro bono work for right wing people. At some point, you should say no too. The earlier you say no, the earlier you file a brief like Harvard, the better you are, the more integrity you show. But there will be opportunities. And my hope is that anyone reading this brief realizes we had no basis to cave. It's absolutely illegal. And again, I don't run around holding my breath for the US Supreme Court, but this is so well reasoned and strong, and we can talk about it. This is written by some of the most conservative lawyers in America. This brief, they Harvard wisely hired truly. I mean, remember Robert Hur, who did the investigation of Biden and really,
Yep.
he's one of the lawyers who's saying that Trump is behaving completely illegally. The other one, who's someone I happen to have known through college and law school, is Bill Burke, who ushered Kavanaugh through the Supreme Court process and worked
Wow.
for the Bush DOJ. So this isn't just liberal lawyers, and they do a good job too, signing on and saying this. This is some of the most super lawyers in the conservative world who probably know on a first name basis most of the justices saying this is outrageous. And I think that posture. And by the way, Donald Trump around the same time today that I put this out, maybe a little bit earlier, he tweeted, I don't know if you saw this, he tweeted about the Harvard case and said, one of the lawyers on this case works for me, Bill Burke, and said my sons need to fire him right away because he does apparently work for the. So he's threatened when he sees that some of the most respected conservative lawyers. I mean, one of them sits on the Fox News board. He's the one who wrote the language you just read. And by the way, there's so much more language in this brief beyond even what you read, just about how academic freedom is at the core of the First Amendment. And here's one. Unless Harvard does, this is in the complaint, unless Harvard does exactly what the government wants in the way the government wants and achieves the precise balance of viewpoints the government wants, Harvard stands to lose billions of dollars in federal funding. It, if we saw that in another country, we'd be horrified. And here, more than other countries, we have a First Amendment that protects against that. So I think this is on very, very solid ground. And I love that it's conservative lawyers. Again, what's Trump trying to do right now? He's trying to keep lawyers from signing up for cases defending who he considers enemies. So I love that it was conservative lawyers who took on this case and are not cowed by what he's trying to do to law firms. I think that's also a strong statement as well.
Yeah, it is, and it should be a lesson for members of Congress. Like, this is how you stand up, you have safety in numbers, you inspire other people to join on with you, you end up with 150 colleges and universities, and there will be many, many other people who will sign on to letters like the one that they put out. And that the point you made earlier about Columbia is going to have another opportunity to say no because they're going to come back. This is like anyone who has watched one mob movie, has read one book about the mob. Like once you're in, like it's never enough. You're always going to be asked to give and give and give, and there's not going to be any bottom to it. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to get out. But you're never going to reach a point where Donald Trump and people like him in his administration will say, okay, well, yeah, you've done enough.
No.
We're good. We're not going to ask anything more of you. And that isn't so obvious to people at this point
Yeah.
that this doesn't work.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely the case. And I do, as you said, it's hard to be optimistic in this dark time, but I spoke to a group of history professors in Chicago a few weeks ago, and I gave a speech about there are two paths. There's united defiance or divided compliance. We know divided compliance leads to the downward spiral. It's inevitable. And when I said it then, there had almost been no schools that had said anything but what Columbia. This is right after Columbia. And what I love is only a few weeks later, as you said, there's courage in numbers. That the first shot I saw across the bow that I really admired was the Georgetown law dean, who didn't file a suit but wrote a letter back to that U.S. attorney in D.C. who said he wouldn't hire any. And it was just like this. It was like, this is an absolute violation of our First Amendment. It was very strong. And then you have Harvard saying no, and now you have hundreds. And all of a sudden, if you're a university, you're answering for why you're not joining this group as opposed to why you are. And that is what you're saying. We want to change the incentives. So you're better off speaking up for democracy, defending the integrity of your institution, than being the outlier who caved too soon. And so my hope is, and it feels very different now than when I spoke at that conference of historians where they were literally, because they're historians, talk about being under attack. History is one of the censorship of the history is one of the real reasons. And let's be clear. The reason they are attacking Harvard and other schools is what J.D. Vance told us 4 years ago. They consider universities and professors the enemy. Yep. Not because, just like Orban did. Some schools are saying, well, let's study what we've been doing wrong to invite this. What you did wrong to invite this was that you are a university.
Right.
The idea that you're going to go do all this soul searching as if you are somehow, you did something wrong. No, this is what authoritarians do. As J.D. Vance said, by being a university that's independent in the way ours are, you are the enemy, and they want to either destroy you or co-opt you to be a right-wing university. And it's not because of what some professor at your school said or what students did. It's because you are a university. And the sooner you see that NIH attacks, like campus protest attacks, like attacks on endowments, that's all the same attack. And it's happening not because you did something, but because they just don't want universities to look like they do in America. Then you can figure out join in the defiance quick because there's nothing you can do except be co opted to make them go away.
Yep. And
And
we're
what's great is that people are figuring it out and they're signing up, and there now are the numbers that I think show that people are uniting in defiance. Now, I don't know what that path leads to. Is it certain? No. Could it be painful? Yes. But it's better than the certain path
yeah,
if you give in.
yeah,
That is
it's better than
inevitably
the
a downward
alternative.
spiral to being co opted, which
Yep.
is what Orban has done in Hungary and what other authoritarians just do. It's part of the entire picture that they're trying to create.
And we're seeing this in other areas as well, these strength in numbers sort of actions that are being taken. There are 12 states that just joined in legal action against the Trump administration around his illegal, unconstitutional overstepping his authority as the chief executive tariffs. Um,
Right.
and can you talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
one for us?
That one's funny because here you have I think it's probably mostly or all Democratic AGs who are filing a lawsuit to protect a Republican Congress's powers. They're basically saying, hey, if Congress wants to, it's their duty to decide duties and taxes and tariffs. The president can't just do it. Now, like everything, just like this Harvard case, it's his implementation of policy that's illegal. People are allowed to raise tariffs in America, but it's supposed to go through Congress. Just like Harvard can amend its policies, but it's Harvard, not the president of the United States. In this case, what the lawsuit is saying, he's calling upon emergency powers to basically steal Congress's power to raise tariffs. There's no emergency. We have challenges in our country, but the idea that, and this is what he's trying to argue, that because fentanyl is coming to the country, that lets him do universal tariffs around the world is absurd. And so here we have a bunch of attorneys general who basically are going to court to say, this is for Congress. Mike Johnson is the one who's supposed to determine this. And again, I think it's kind of like it's like how they're using the Alien Enemies Act to deport as if we're at war with Venezuela when we're not. They're basically falsely using emergency powers to do things that the president has no power to do. If Trump were to convince the majority of Congress to raise tariffs, we could have that policy debate. It would lead to the same results it is now, higher costs and what's going to be a meltdown in the economy. But the way he's doing it, and that's the case, is also illegal. It's literally violating Congress and congressional powers.
Well, and as Trump so often does, his own actions end up undermining his argument that he has the authority to do the things that he's doing. The arbitrary way that he's imposed these tariffs and that he's put them on and taken them off and raised them and lowered them and said maybe they're temporary or they're forever permanent. You can't do that and say, I have to use this emergency act
Right.
because there's something so serious going on. It's either
True.
serious or you can be completely arbitrary in your actions,
Correct.
but you can't have both.
That is a great point. I mean, is the emergency starting one day and stopping the next? I mean,
Right.
exactly. It's absurd. And the only thing I think he's probably saying about the emergency, I believe, is we've got to stop fentanyl from coming to the country. As if you would start charging tariff duties on the sales of fentanyl. I mean, it's the most absurd argument
Right.
anyway.
It's just if we can just raise the cost of fentanyl,
Yeah,
that's
if we
how we're
just
going to
yeah, we
solve this.
the government will basically be part of the drug deal, getting
Right.
the revenue from fentanyl sales. I mean, it's the dumbest argument of all time. But I think that's literally the emergency he's trying to claim is happening. But
Yeah.
your point's a great one, which is if you're turning the on and off switch on every week, depending on what the latest billionaire told you to do, you're disproving that there's an emergency in the first place.
Yeah. You cannot declare war one week because it was an essential fight to have. And then the next week say, well, turns out it wasn't such a war. Oh, but then
Right.
again.
Yeah,
that leader
exactly.
said
No, that's
something
a
I
great
didn't
point.
like that hurt my feelings, and so now
Yeah,
we're at war again.
yeah,
So the
that's a
the
great
last
point.
thing I want to touch on is Tesla and Elon's exit, or I guess he's sort of pretending it's not a full exit; it's a
Yeah,
partial exit from Doge and working for the government. But this is another place I think people can really find inspiration about this collective action that we can take. The Tesla
yes.
takedown effort had real world implications that ended up resulting in hopefully removing this monster
Yeah.
from the federal government. So, how do you see all of these tying together, and what should people be
I
taking away?
I really so I I wrote that book Saving Democracy. I'm writing a new edition to come out as soon as possible, and I'm working on this chapter now because even in the first book I said put your money where democracy is. Especially at a time where billionaires like Musk are asserting themselves into the daily operations of government. You know, they're the ones who said money is speech, will make your money speech. And if you can use your money in what you buy and what you don't buy, and what you make unattractive to buy, an incentive system to get the hell out of our business as a government, good, do it. And I think it's a great example. There are a lot of smaller cases too, but I really do believe that. Again, Citizens United says corporate money is speech. Well, so is our money, and our spending really can matter on at all different levels. And then I think on the flip side, I think if a company is actually doing things to lift democracy, and I write about this in the book, if a company is using its footprint to encourage people to register to vote, for example, or other things, well, if all other things being equal, frequent that company. We need whether it's politicians or universities or businesses, we want the incentives to line up so they feel rewarded for doing the right thing. And like Elon Musk, if you're going to destroy our democracy, well, no one's buying your damn cars. I had a couple of years ago, we had a Tesla on order. We canceled it. It was even before this stuff. But that incentives is to the extent, especially that we're in a world where the billionaires seem to be taking over everything. If fighting back through the pocketbook is how we do it, it can be very powerful, as we've seen. I mean, those sales drops are credible and good. I think that is something to learn from.
Yeah, we know that those earning calls, folks on those boards and investors have very strong opinions and lots of influence. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it feels like a small thing when you make a choice not to purchase
Yeah.
goods from a certain company.
And by the
My
way, this goes beyond one. I wrote about this in this book, Saving Democracy. You know, Disney in Florida, uh, all of a sudden, they had given to a bunch of truly like anti-quality gerrymandered state reps, and then all of a sudden they passed one really. I think it was the "Don't Say Gay" bill that
Yep.
got so infamous. And in that case, the employees of Disney flipped out appropriately and really made a lot of noise. And I think employees of these companies can also be very powerful. And Disney ended up backing off over time because their employees were like, you tell us that you embrace diversity. Why are you giving to a state rep who's attacking your own people? And so I think it's customers. I think it can be employees. I think it'd be others. And then on the flip side, I don't know if you saw, but there was a really good clip. I don't know him that well. I can't speak to all his policies, but the CEO of Marriott
Mm.
said, "Hey," he said publicly, it's on Instagram. It was a really powerful video. He said, um, you know, times change, politics change, but we've always been about serving people equally and hiring people equally. So he was basically pushing back about being bullied to get out of DEI. And he just said it because he believed it. And he said, our company's been around 100 years. We're not going to react to every new president as if they could tell us what to do. He got 40,000 emails from his own employees on their own saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And now he's talking about it. So I think that reward the right thing in any way possible and don't buy the products of people who are using some of the money you pay them by buying them to do bad things to our democracy.
Yep, and when we're being flooded by all of this bad news and new executive orders and all of this stuff that is just, washing over our heads every day, focus on this kind of stuff, folks,
Yeah,
because it works. It
yeah,
there is a history of this working. These movements do have a huge amount of power, and the more they get rolling, they just take on this momentum,
yeah.
and it feels like that's starting to happen,
Can I add
and
one other thing? I don't know if you saw
sure.
something. So I was invited to be the MC of a town hall meeting. Did you see this?
Oh,
Um,
yes, your
oh, this
empty chair?
yes, it
That
was
was
so funny.
so
So
good.
we had a this was in Middletown, Ohio, where JD Vance grew up. It's a gerrymandered district. The congressman never goes to anything that is not scripted. So they had an empty chair town hall meeting. This is a pretty conservative area. I was the MC, packed. Okay. These people told me later it was so great to be around other people. This was courage being contagious. But the best part, and this is something that I'm happy to help people think about, the people who organized this, the Butler County Democratic Party, believed that these citizens not only had a right to ask questions, which we fielded like 100 questions, we narrowed it down to 10, but we used AI and we said to AI, we called it Chat GOP. We said, how would Congressman Davidson respond to this question
That's
based upon his public statements, his public stances? And so, because we thought people should actually hear what their congressman actually says that they'll never hear in person because he's never there. And then, and I would read his answer, and then I would rebut and fact check it and ask the audience who they believed, and they would boo their congressman. It was incredible. It was a great interaction, but it provided sort of a transparency. It was better than an empty town hall meeting where we simply cheer for ourselves. We would explain to the audience, well, in other audiences, let's hear what Davidson says about the SAVE Act or about cutting funds for kids with disabilities. And so it was so just in the spirit of doing things that get people together, that empty chair town hall, including that transparency about his real positions, was a huge hit. And I would encourage, amid many things to do, that kind of, if you're in a red district, a gerrymandered district, and you're frustrated, one great way to build alliances and energy on the ground is to organize it just like Butler County did. I linked to the video of this in my most recent Substack for people who want to learn more about it. But I didn't organize it, but man, it was really, really effective.
Yeah, and these are not the a lot of these actions that are being taken around, these town halls, these aren't professional organizers. These aren't people who've been doing this for decades, even on a volunteer basis. A lot of these people have never
Yeah.
spoken up and gotten involved in political action before, and they're doing it now because they recognize what the stakes are and what just a dangerous place we're in right
Yeah.
now. And they're making things happen. So there's none of us that should be feeling like, well, I'm one person. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never tried to make these things happen before. Reach out to a couple
Yeah.
other people and start writing letters, making phone calls to
Absolutely.
your congressman's office, to your local party's office, and insist that this stuff happens. And if they won't do it, then contact a local reporter and tell them they won't do it and you'd like to
Yeah.
hold a press conference and talk about it. And
Yeah.
this stuff's going to get covered on the local level, and you have the power to do that. So
The woman we've had in the last 3 weeks, we've had two protests in Cincinnati. I spoke at one of them. Each had about 4,000 people.
that's
The
amazing.
woman who organized them, I did one Substack on her 3 months ago, had never been involved in a protest except showing up to one. But she saw on a website they needed someone in Cincinnati to do it. She believed in it. Um, she just signed up on the website, and all of a sudden, she is leading rallies of 4,000 and 5,000 people. The
Amazing.
biggest protests I've seen around here in a long time. One person deciding I want to make a difference,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's been
incredibly
incredible. Yeah.
inspiring.
So,
That's so great. Well, David, thank you for talking about
of course.
all of this with us today. It's so nice to be able to talk about um, things that really should be giving us a lot of hope and
Yeah.
inspiring us to do more. So we'll talk again very soon, I'm
All
sure.
righty.
Thank you so
Good
much.
to see you,
Thanks
Lisa.
everybody
Thanks
for
everyone for
joining us.
joining us. Take care. See you soon.